Well, hello, parents, and welcome back to another one of our Faith at Home podcast. It's a time specifically geared towards helping equip you in building faith at home with your kids. And my hope is that this is a conversation that impacts somebody who has a newborn all the way through somebody whose kid is about to graduate and head off to college, maybe even older than that, young adults who you still have influence in. And so now that we've kind of the last 2 weeks talked a lot about fundamentals and systems of giving you some tools with using our Faith at Home curriculum, I want to begin to turn our attention towards some more profound, bigger topics that might actually directly apply to modeling faith and having faith conversations and some of these other tools that I hope will be helpful for you. And so today I want to talk about modeling faith at home. I kind of have mentioned that over the last couple of weeks in regards to a lot of the sticky faith stuff that we're going to be jumping into exploring through some of this stuff. I have in front of me this book, The Sticky Faith Guide for Your Family, a very good resource. And I'm going to kind of highlight some things from it. If you want a copy, would love to get you one personally. Would love that. So just let me know. But a lot of great ideas, brainstorming ideas for parents, but we're going to kind of page through some of this stuff as maybe some tools to create a conversation for you and your spouse, or maybe some other parents you're connected to, and maybe create some ideas for you to continue to create a sticky faith environment at your home. And so what we're talking about today, modeling faith and how that matters. A lot of it is around this idea that our kids will look like us in a lot of different ways. Anna and I talk about this all the time when we will notice things like Annika. She has my sense of humor, which I know a lot of you are like, oh, that's not a good thing. But I love when Annika has these just one-liner jokes. I'm like, that's my girl, right? Or Molly has these like sounds she makes, and whenever she'll be like, oh. And then I look at Anna and she's like, yep, that sounds just like me, right? Our kids look a lot like us when we get mad, how we discipline. I remember one time watching Annika a couple years ago, playing with her toys on the floor, and the toys got the exact same punishment that Annika was given 2 days prior, right? So these are things that they tend to mimic. They live out what they see or experience from us. And so in a lot of ways, watching our kids do life, watching our kids even do faith, can feel like looking in a mirror sometimes, and it can be very convicting, especially when you see something that your kid does that you don't like, but then you now realize that they got that from you, right? Like maybe the way you worded something, or the way you acted in a certain way that is now being mimicked. You maybe feel convicted about that. And so I totally understand. But in a lot of ways, kids will mimic us, especially the younger kids. They tend to replicate what they see. And that is up and through till about 6th and 7th grade, where they start developing their critical thinking skills. And these skills are what help them begin to think critically about the world, assessing what they hear, what they know. They begin that journey, which is why you tend to start seeing around 5th, 6th, 7th grade, your kids start to separate from you in certain ways. They're accessing the world, everything that they've been taught and learned up until this point. Now they're beginning to compare it to what they're seeing in the world, comparing it to their friends and their household, how they do life, how they talk about faith, what they see on TV or music or online, all this kind of stuff. They start seeing these things and comparing it to what they know. And then as they get older and they get through that process, they begin to really wrestle with which one makes more sense? Which one do I truly believe? Especially when there's a lot of conflict between those two views. And so they start wrestling with that. And when they get to about 10th grade is when I, being in youth ministry for the last decade, I tend to see a lot of change happen in 10th graders. 10th grade, in my opinion, is the hardest year out of all grades, because when you think about it, they start AP classes around 10th grade, and so their homework load increases significantly. They start varsity sports in 10th grade, and so their time commitment goes up. They get their driver's license, so their freedom in a sense goes up, but a lot of times they need to pay for certain things like gas, and so they typically tend to get a job around 10th grade. And so all that happens that year, so a lot of change in their life. But that freedom will then lead them to thinking about things of, do I believe what I have been taught my whole life, especially over the last 4 years of critically thinking about a lot of this stuff and trying to figure it out. And that time, somewhere between 10th grade and up through maybe their sophomore year, junior year, senior year of college, is this formation period where they really, in a lot of ways, talk about this idea of making my faith my own. And so they begin exploring, they begin trying to, even figure out, test these things that they think about in the world. And I would love to talk more about that on a different podcast, because that's some pretty profound things that we just talked about. But we'll come back to that at another time. Today, I really want to talk specifically about modeling. And it's all surrounded by, the sticky faith goal. The whole idea of sticky faith is, at the end, factors that help our children and youth develop a faith that will stick with them when they head off into college. And so you can read more about their research. I think you can even find it online for free. But a long story short, the key statistic they found that there appeared to be about 50% of kids who were core church kids and graduated high school, about 50% of them essentially stuck with their faith, continued to be engaged in the local church, were actively pursuing spiritual practices. About 50% of them continued, and the other half kind of stepped away from their faith. Some research groups have different studies. I know Barna, I think, found like 40% left their faith. Lifeway would say somewhere around like 65%. It's even heartbreaking to hear 10% might even be walking away from their faith. And so the whole sticky faith concept was try to figure out what are some of the variables. While there's never going to be a silver bullet, what are some of the variables that have this happen to help create that faith that will stick with them? And so they focused on the other 50% and kind of looked at their life. And one of the things that they found from that group was that primary faith influencers of these kids were their parents. In other words, their parents were key into helping them have that faith that stuck with them. And so one of the things that sticky faith kind of talks about is this idea twofold is, one, we get what we are, in a sense, that mirror effect, that our kids kind of become who we are and how we understand. And so those things that we operate under, or the things we believe and communicate, in a lot of ways impacts and influences our kids. Now, there's obviously, take that with a grain of salt, because we know plenty of stories of people who have walked away from their faith, from families who have profound faith. And so it's not a guarantee, but that is a huge influence they found in their research. But at the same time, I think what's even more profound is their second kind of component to that idea. Not only do we get what we are, but probably more so, we get what our kids think we are. In other words, you may have a profound faith, but you never share it with anybody. And so your kids never see it actually modeled. And so they actually don't know you have a profound faith. Instead, what they see is you go to church, you read your Bible, and you pray before every meal. What's so profound about that? But they don't know what's going on in your heart. They don't know the conversations you're having with other people, the conversation you had with somebody about sharing your faith, right? They don't see that modeled. And so not only do you got to wrestle with that thing, is that they will kind of become what they think we are as well. In fact, there's this quote that I have from Dr. Christian Smith from the University of Notre Dame, who concluded this in a national survey. The most important social influence in shaping young people's religious lives are actually the lives modeled and taught to them by their parents, right? So it's not just the actions that were instilled, but it's actually modeled by their parents. And now the reality is, you may not feel like it, especially when your kids get into the middle and high school years, but you are still their primary faith influence. And it's because they're watching you. And I'd even say during a pandemic season, you're probably their only faith influence in a lot of ways. But they are watching you. Our kids are watching you. Even as middle schoolers and high schoolers, they're watching how you do life and how you live out your faith. They're watching the choices you make, the things you value, the way you respond to certain situations, the friends you have, the choices you make, how you spend your time, your money, your energy. Like, you are being watched all the time by your kids, which means your strategy for developing a sticky faith in your family starts actually with assessing the vibrancy of your own faith. Like, to assess my own faith is going to be the starting point for what I hope it for in my kids. And that puts a lot of pressure on us. I'm going to acknowledge that right now. That's a lot of pressure to feel that weight of saying, if my faith is not where it should be, I'm already hindering my kids' faith. And it creates forms of guilt. It creates pressure to perform or to maybe fake it, but we don't want to do that, right? But here's the thing that can be most encouraging about this idea of our own faith is very influential in the life of our own kids' faith. The most encouraging component to this is that you can control your own faith. As much as we would love to be able to say and control what our kids say and do and believe, right? We can't. Like, we can't do that. However, you can control your own faith life. You can control the choices you make, the way you live, the spiritual disciplines you embrace, right? And you can control how you model it, how you show that to your kids. And so in a sense, it invites you to maybe aspire your own life and faith to look like and be like what you hope for your kids someday. Live that out. Think about what you want your kids' life and faith to look like someday, and then pursue that yourself, right? That's kind of the invitation, and that's something you can control. So be encouraged by that. And so things to think about as we talk about modeling faith in front of your kids, right? So you have that idea of what that looks like in mind. Here's some ideas that I just want to give you some practical ideas on living that out in front of your kids. And so, number one, obviously, live the kind of faith you want your kids to have. So engage in spiritual practices in front of your kids or even with your kids. So show your kids that you are carving out time to read your Bible and to pray. Let them know that this actually matters to you. Even model with them how to pray. You know, we teach our kids about how to pray. We pray before our meals. We have a prayer that I taught them for bedtime. And at some point here, now that it's kind of become repetitious, we're going to try to mix it up as a way to kind of keep them seeing that it's not just saying these words, but rather it's a conversation, right? You're creating opportunities to continue to model and teach this to them. And so at some point we invite our kids to pray. Even Molly, like, you know, it's funny, Molly, we sit down for dinner and Molly wants to pray. Oh yeah, I'm so excited. Molly, go ahead and pray. Now I lay me down to sleep, right? She prays our bedtime prayer at dinner, which is totally cute. And I love it that she has a heart to pray. But those are things now where we can begin to invite them into those spaces and whatever it looks like for them as a way to create that space. So model it in front of them. Do these spiritual practices with them. Teach your kids the value of things that matter to God. For example, show them that it is okay to shut off a bad or inappropriate movie, right? If something's scary, I think of like Molly, if we're watching something that she obviously is scared, even if it was a cartoon, because you know how cartoons can be these days, we can say, you know what, Molly, it's okay. We're going to shut this off. It's okay to turn off a scary movie, right? Give them permission to do that, to leave a movie theater as a middle schooler, high schooler, to say, you know, something about this is not right. Something about this is not appropriate. Let's leave. Right? Give them that permission to know that they can do that. Show them how to maybe care for other people by serving together or visiting people in need. Obviously, some of these ideas will be after the pre-pandemic era, you know, or after the pandemic era. But, you know, think about the idea of what does it look like to care for other people, and do that with your family. Help them to see that how they spend their time reveals the things they value. Right? And we got to think about that ourselves. Like, how are we as parents spending our time, and what does that reveal about what we value, right? The other thing too to think about is that it's okay if you're not perfect, that is totally okay. And in fact, I would recommend that when you make a mistake, own it. Actually ask them for forgiveness. Remind them, you know what, I did not do that right. That was wrong of me. Can you forgive me for that? It's letting them know that God is working in you to be better at this area, and invite them to show you grace even. And then that kind of models what it looks like to pursue forgiveness, to even how to forgive others, right? And so you are truly taking the mindset that you are modeling your faith to your kids during this time, right? So that's number one, model your faith. Second thing is this: talk regularly, find opportunities to talk regularly about life and faith together. So this is all about the idea of finding ways to connect with your kids and share life with one another. One of the things we do at our house is most nights we try to be intentional to eat dinner at the table together. I've heard from a lot of people that dinner at the table is kind of a thing of the past because everybody's just so busy, running errands and getting food on the way to something. And the idea is saying, use this pandemic time to slow down. But how do we slow down in such a way where we create common space that we all come together, even if it's just one time throughout our day? And so what we do is we make sure we make dinner our one-time space. It doesn't happen every night. Obviously things happen, but we try to do our best to protect that space together. We eat dinner at the table, and during dinner we do what we call highs and lows. So we go around the table. Even Molly participates, and it's fun trying to interpret what she's saying. But what's the best part of your day? What's the worst part of your day? And what's something you're thankful for? And so we provide space, and we just go around the table. It's a great way to just kind of hear what's going on in the world. It's even a great way to ask questions to hear more. What do you mean by that? Or, well, tell me more about that story you just said. Ask questions, right? You're creating space of conversation. And not only does it get you into their world, but it also gets them into your world, right? That's an encouragement for you to also share about your day. Let them hear about things you are learning or things you are wrestling with. Share with them places you saw Jesus show up in your day, right? It's an opportunity for them to hear things going on in your world and to be conscious of the fact that we're together learning, and another way to model to them. I also encourage you to maybe be doing activities with your kids individually. I, for one, love, not so much lately because of the pandemic, but we would try to do daddy-daughter dates with my girls. And so Annika and I had this tradition when Anna was going to be out at a meeting or worship practice or whatever, that Annika and I would do these daddy-daughter dates where we would literally, after Molly went to bed, we would watch Star Wars and eat ice cream. And for whatever reason, Annika thought it was the best thing in the world. And I think it's just simply because she wanted to spend time with me. And how do we look for those opportunities to create some sort of gathering where we can make memories together? Sometime maybe go out to eat, go on a one-on-one event with your kids and try to figure it out as a family, who's doing what, and figure that out. But use that opportunity to create a milestone event or a memory making event for them. And then finally, just find opportunities to spend intentional time together. Go on a hike up the bluff, go for a family walk, do a family movie night. Just time together can be a profound instigator in creating opportunities to talk regularly about life and faith, right? So that's the second thing. And the last thing I just want to mention, especially for those of you who have older kids, the one thing that Sticky Faith was very clear to point out is that it is never too early or too late to start instilling a sticky faith environment. You might have a newborn and be like, this doesn't apply to me. Actually, it does. Like the things you can develop now will instill in them as they begin to reach that age where they are kind of replicating, mirroring you, right? Or your kids might be in 11th and 12th grade and already on their way out, and you're now finally getting this place of saying, I want to develop a sticky faith. You can start that now. it's never too late. Faith development will always be a lifelong process, even after they have left the home and are living on their own. Like, you are still, in a sense, an influencer in their faith. So it's never too late to start that. However, it will be hard. I will acknowledge that. So if your kids are in the middle school, high school now, go slow. Like, don't jump all in and start completely changing your entire family's life, but because they're going to sense that it feels forced, it might feel fake, and they're more likely to not engage. And so rather, choose maybe a new ritual or one activity that you're going to start to slowly introduce, like maybe the highs and lows during dinner. Hey, I just want to hear about your days. Share about this, right? Slowly navigate ways to model faith and engage them in conversations that will feel more normal rather than kind of forced, right? And so that's something for us to be taking as parents, modeling faith to our kids, actually living it out in front of them as a way to model it, finding opportunities to talk regularly about life and faith together. And lastly, just remember, it's never too early for those of you with young kids, and it's never too late for those with older kids to begin to instill and model faith to your kids. So my hope and prayer is that this week, even, with your spouse, maybe with another parent, brainstorm together, talk about ideas you have, even comment on this video if you're watching the video version of what does it look like for you to model, how have you created those conversation opportunities. And we'll see you right back here next week on our Faith at Home podcast.